November 27, 1922. Gosport, Indiana, a child was born into a world that would soon face a huge money crash and a big world war. Eugene Morrison Stoner came into life with only his name. In a small farming town where most families struggled through the Great Depression, nobody could have guessed that this boy who would never go to college and who would spend his early years fixing aircraft parts in California factories would one day design the most talked about and widely used military rifle. In modern history, the pencil moved across paper as the young machinist drew changes to weapons he had never been trained to build. He worked late at night in his Long Beach garage after long shifts at Vega Aircraft Company. Stoner was trying to solve a hard problem that had bothered military designers for decades. How could you make a rifle light enough for soldiers to carry through thick jungles and tall mountains, strong enough to stop an enemy at 500 yards, and still work in the toughest conditions on Earth? Experts in the firearms world said it could not be done. The United States Army Ordnance Corps said it could not be done. History, going back to the American Civil War, said it could not be done. A real lightweight automatic rifle was impossible. The physics did not allow it. The materials did not exist. Anyone who said otherwise was either a fool or lying. Stoner was neither. He just asked questions that everyone else thought were true. That courage would one day give millions of soldiers a new weapon, change how infantry fights, and start arguments that still go on today. The year was 1939. Eugene Stoner had just finished Long Beach Polytechnic. High school college was not an option. The Depression had ruined his family savings, leaving no money for school. While richer classmates went to Stanford and Berkeley, the young man walked into Vega Aircraft Company and asked for work. They hired him to put armament on training aircraft. The job needed careful work, paying, attention to details, and understanding machines. It also gave him something very special: access to aircraft-grade aluminum, a material most gun makers had never used. For many years, rifle makers used wood and steel, heavy, dense materials, traditional for rifles, materials that could stand the blast of gunpowder and the shock of recoil. The young engineer looked at these materials and saw limits. Steel was strong but heavy. Wood soaked up water and bent. Both made weapons heavier for soldiers who had to walk miles. But aluminum, the light metal used for planes, had different qualities. It was much lighter than steel. It did not rust easily, and when built the right way, it could be strong enough for a rifle. The hard part was nobody had made a real combat rifle from aluminum before every try had failed. Stoner noted that fact and put it aside to think about later December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor. Like many other young Americans, the 19-year-old joined the military. He signed up with the United States Marine Corps and worked in aviation ordnance. The Corps sent him to the South Pacific and to northern China, where he kept and fixed machine guns, rifles, and automatic weapons. He never fought face to face, but he learned something just as useful for a future gunmaker. He watched weapons break. He saw Marines struggle with the M1 Garand, a great rifle that was still too heavy for jungle fighting. He saw the M11918 Browning automatic rifle, powerful but almost 20 pounds. He studied the M1941 Johnson rifle and light machine gun, new ideas that many military planners thought were too tricky. Each night after his repair work, the young Marine drew ideas. He filled notebooks with fixes, different gas systems, and new bolt ideas. His shipmates thought he was obsessed, and they were right. By 1943, he had made two .30 caliber carbine prototypes in his free time. Neither was finished, but both showed ideas that would later appear in his new revolutionary designs. The straight line. Stock sent recoil backward instead of up. The simple gas system removed heavy operating rods. The modular build let soldiers take the rifle apart, fast. These were not random ideas. They were planned answers to problems the designer had seen in battle. The war ended in August 1945. The 22-year-old veteran returned to California and looked for work in machine shops. He was hired by Whitaker, an aircraft parts maker, and started on the factory floor. Within months, his skill with precision machines won him a promotion to design engineer. There he used aerospace manufacturing methods and learned how to machine aircraft-grade aluminum to the tight sizes needed for firearms. That knowledge would prove critical. By 1954, almost a decade had passed. He had worked many engineering jobs and still kept designing firearms in his garage. His prototypes drew attention from gun experts, but no maker would risk funding production. Then a chance changed everything. A small company called Armalite Part, a Fairchild Engine and Airplane Corporation, looked for a chief design engineer. Armalite was set up to bring modern materials and new manufacturing methods to the firearms world. They had fewer than a dozen employees. No factory, they were mainly a research and development team hoping to license designs to larger makers. It was perfect for the self-taught engineer. He was hired on October 4, 1954, and immediately began work on his most ambitious project. The United States Army announced in Taipei, 1955, it wanted a replacement for the M1 Garand. The new weapon had to fire the NATO 7 62mm cartridge, the same round used by most Allied nations. It had to be reliable, accurate, and if possible, lighter than the 9 to 12-pound Garand. Every major firearms maker in America and Europe sent designs. Springfield Armory offered the T-44 basically. An updated M1 Garand for the new Cartridge Fabrique Nationale of Belgium submitted the FAL rifle, which was already in service with several European armies. Both were normal designs with steel receivers, wooden stocks, and gas piston systems used. And proven for decades, both weighed around 9 nabours. The Armalite entry was called AR-10 Armalite Rifle No. 10. It weighed 7.25 the LB Army test. People at Springfield Armory thought the specs had a mistake. They said no rifle firing full power. NATO ammo could weigh so little and still work right. They thought the paperwork was wrong. Then the rifle came for testing in late 1956. The AR-10 looked unlike any military rifle the testers had seen. The stock and handguard used fiberglass with foam parts borrowed from aircraft building. The receiver was forged from 7275 T6 aluminum alloy, the same metal used in plane structures. The rifle had a straight line shape with the stock lined up right behind the barrel instead of dropping below like old rifles, that made recoil push straight back into the shooter's shoulder instead of making the muzzle rise. The gas system was new. Instead of a heavy operating rod like the M1 Garand or a piston like the FL, the design sent expanding gas straight from the barrel through a tube to the bolt carrier. This method, often called direct impingement, though really an internal expanding, gas system cut almost 2 idurtol of moving metal. The first test reports were excited. Testers said the AR-10 was the easiest rifle to control in full automatic fire they had ever tried. The straight-line shape with a good muzzle brake made the rifle very controllable, even while firing powerful NATO rounds. Accuracy was very good. The rifle regularly put shots in groups under 2 in at 100 YD, which was better than the T-44, or the FAL. Initial reliability looked good. The aluminum receiver showed no stress or failure. Then the Army did endurance tests. They put the AR-10 through torture tests to find any weak spots. They fired thousands of rounds through the rifle without cleaning or doing maintenance to see how it held up under hard use. They put it through hot and cold tests, and they dunked it in mud and sand, and in one test the composite barrel, a steel liner with an aluminum sleeve burst, and the rifle blew apart and was ruined. The Army testers wrote their report, and they rejected the AR-10. They said it had smart new parts, and it was very light and easy to control. But they decided it would take 5 more years or more to fix the problems and make it fit for use. The United States Army chose the T-44, and that gun went into production as the M14 rifle in 1957. So the AR-10 failed for the American Army, but the designer learned a key lesson. The composite barrel was a bad idea, put in to save weight against his advice. He quickly made a version with a full steel barrel. That change came too late for the U.S. Army trials, but other buyers still wanted the rifle. In 1957, Armalite licensed the AR-10 to Artillerie Enriingen, a Dutch gunmaker. Over the next years, the Dutch firm made fewer than 10,000 AR-10 rifles and sold them to Sudan, Portugal, and some other countries. Portuguese paratroopers who used the AR-10 in African colonial wars praised its accuracy and how it held up French Foreign Legion units in Chad, who got a few by various routes, said it was one of the best combat rifles they had ever used. The AR-10 did work. It had simply shown up too late and was too new for cautious American military buying officers who liked the old reliable designs. While the AR-10 was made in the Netherlands, the Armalite engineer was already working on a new design. He had shown that a light rifle could work with full power ammo, but a new question rose in military thinking. Did soldiers really need full power cartridges? Studies from World War II and the Korean War showed most fighting happened under 300 yards. At those ranges, a smaller, lighter cartridge could work just as well. And soldiers could carry far more rounds. The United States Continental Army Command set new rules in early 1957. They asked for a light rifle that fired a small, fast cartridge. The answer was to make the AR-10 design smaller. The straight-line shape, the gas system, the aluminum receiver, and the modular build all stayed the same. But everything was made for a much smaller bullet, the 223 Remington. This bullet was first made for hunting small animals. It fired a tiny bullet under 60 grains at speeds over 3,000 feet per second. The high speed made the small bullet very deadly, even though it was light. The small bullet let a soldier carry 300 rounds instead of 140 of the heavy NATO ammo. The first AR-15 prototype was finished in May 1957. With a 20-round magazine, the rifle weighed just 6 pounds less than half the weight of the M14. It was 39 inches long compared to the M14's 44 inches. It could shoot in semi-automatic and fully automatic modes. Early tests showed it could go through a steel helmet at 500 yards and a standard infantry flak jacket at 300 yards. The wound effects were very strong. The tiny, fast bullet would turn and break apart in tissue, making a wound much bigger than the bullet's size. The United States Army tested the AR-15 but turned it down. They had just chosen the M14 and did not want another rifle, especially one using what they called a varmint bullet. The Ordnance Corps, the part in charge of buying weapons, actively fought the new design. Some historians say it was personal. Armalite had said no to the Ordnance Corps when they offered to buy the AR-10 rights. They feared the Army would hide the rifle. The Ordnance Corps remembered. They had put their reputation on the M14 and would not admit they picked the wrong gun. Armalite tried to sell the AR-15 to other countries. Some were interested, but U.S. foreign aid rules said allies had to use guns that worked with American ammo. Since the AR-15 used a different bullet than the M14, the countries could not buy it. By 1959, Armalite had money problems and was in a tight spot. They had spent years developing the AR-10 and AR-15, but had sold very few rifles. The company had no manufacturing capability and relied entirely on licensing. Fees, Fairchild Engine, and Airplane Corporation, Armalite's parent company, decided to cut their losses. In February 1959, Armalite sold the rights to the AR-15 to Colt's Manufacturing Company for $75,000, plus royalties on each rifle produced. It looked like the revolutionary rifle would join thousands of other firearms designs that showed promise, but never reached production. Colt had purchased the rights, but they had no military buyer. The Army did not want the rifle. No foreign military could purchase it. The AR-15 seemed destined for obscurity. Then came a 4th of July barbecue that would change everything. July 4, 1960, a farm in Maryland. Richard Boutell, president of Fairchild Corporation and former president of Armalite, was hosting an Independence Day party. Among the guests was General Curtis LeMay. Vice Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, LeMay was a legend in American military circles. He had planned the firebombing campaign against Japan in World War II. He had commanded Strategic Air Command, building it into the most powerful military force in history. He was known for his demanding personality, his contempt for bureaucracy, and his willingness to fight for what he believed was right. At age 53, he was the youngest four-star general in American history. William Mullen, a cult salesman, had brought an AR-15 to the party, hoping for a chance to show the rifle to any military officers who might attend. When he learned that General LeMay would be present, Mullen prepared a demonstration. He placed watermelons at 50 yards and 150 yards downrange. He handed the AR-15 and several magazines to General LeMay. The general, an experienced shooter, examined the rifle briefly and then opened fire. The watermelons exploded. The tiny 223 bullets, traveling at over 3,000 feet per second, struck the watermelons and caused them to burst dramatically. LeMay fired several magazines, hitting targets at various distances, and many people at the party were amazed and talked about it for weeks. The rifle worked perfectly. When Mullen said one watermelon was left, LeMay refused to shoot it and said, "Let us eat the son of a bitch." The demo went on while the general and guests ate the last watermelon. LeMay asked many questions about the rifle, its ammo, and how it could be made. He learned it weighed 6 lb loaded, compared to the 912 lb M14. He learned a soldier could carry 240 rounds of 5.56 mm versus 100 rounds of 7.62 mm. He learned marksmanship tests showed 43% of AR-15 shooters qualified as expert, while only 22% of M14 shooters did. By the end of the party, General Curtis LeMay had decided he wanted this rifle for the Air Force. Air Force security still used the old M1 carbine from World War II, a weak weapon for guarding air bases. The AR-15 would give them infantry-level firepower while staying light enough for guards who needed to move. LeMay ordered 8.500 rifles and 5 million rounds of ammo on the spot, all from a 4th of July barbecue using watermelon shots. But there was a problem. The United States Army controlled all rifle buying for every military branch, so the Air Force needed the Army to approve the HED purchase. The Army had already rejected the AR-15 and was not likely to change its mind, especially because an Air Force general wanted the rifle. General Maxwell Taylor, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, told President John F. Kennedy that having 2 rifle calibers in the military would cause trouble. LeMay's request was denied. Curtis LeMay did not give up. Over the next 2 years, he ran one of the most persistent push campaigns in U.S. military buying history. The Air Force Vice Chief filed Formal requests went to Pentagon meetings and gave Air Force test data showing the AR-15. He showed that the AR-15 was better than the M14. He said the Army's objections were based on pride, not facts. In the summer of 1961, LeMay became Air Force Chief of Staff, the top officer in the service. From this job, he could go directly to President Kennedy and Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. He asked to approve 80,000 AR-15s to equip the whole Air Force. Again, the request was denied. The general was famous for never giving up. He filed a second request, then a third. Each time Army officials blocked it. They said the M14 was better, and having two rifle calibers in the military would make supply problems. LeMay argued the Air Force already used different weapons than the Army in many cases. The argument went on through 1961 into 1962. Meanwhile, in Southeast Asia, there was growing pressure for a better infantry rifle. American military advisors in South Vietnam said the Viet Cong with Soviet AK-47 rifles were outgunning South Vietnamese troops with M1 Garands. The AK-47 fired an intermediate bullet similar to the AR-15's 5.56mm round. It was lighter than NATO rifles, easier to control in automatic fire, and deadly in the jungle. American advisors started asking for AR-15s for field testing. In late 1961, Secretary of Defense McNamara allowed a small trial. $1,000 AR-15s were sent to Vietnam for testing by special forces and South Vietnamese soldiers. The reports were very positive. Special forces said the AR-15 was perfect for jungle combat. It was light enough to carry through thick plants and short enough for tight spaces. The small bullet let soldiers carry plenty of ammo for long patrols, and it was very effective against enemies. The fast, light bullets made severe wounds. South Vietnamese troops who got AR-15s for testing refused to give them back. They said the rifle's lightweight and control made it far better than their old weapons. Some said it made them feel like they had the firepower of 3 men. Secretary of Defense McNamara was now getting two very different opinions. The Army insisted the M14 was better and said the AR-15 was not good enough for military use. The Air Force Special Forces and reports from Vietnam said the AR-15 was much better. Secretary McNamara ordered more testing. In early 1962, he started a new study to compare the AR-15, the M14, and the Soviet AK-47. This study, called the Hitch Report, came out in summer 1962. The results were shocking for the Army. The AR-15 was better than the M14 in every way. Soldiers with AR-15s could carry more ammo, shoot more accurately, and take care of their rifles more easily than soldiers with M14s. The study said even the M14 could not beat the AK-47. America's newest rifle, adopted 5 years earlier, at great cost, was worse than the Soviet AK-47. The Army argued back. They said the tests were unfair. They did their own tests to show the M14 was better. They said the 5.56mm bullet did not stop enemies well enough. But McNamara made his decision. In November 1962, he approved the first purchase of AR-15s for the Air Force and Army Special Forces. General LeMay finally got approval for his rifles, though not the full 80,000 he had asked for. His persistence had worked. The first 8500 rifles arrived in May 1962, almost 2 years after his original order, at the Maryland barbecue. The rifle was now called the M16 Colt, had made a few changes to the AR-15 design, mainly moving the charging handle from under the carrying handle to the back of the receiver. Production started to increase in November 1963. McNamara ordered 104,000 rifles, $85,000 XM16E1s for the Army and Marines, and 19,000 M16s for the Air Force. The contract was worth $13.5 million, and given to Colt on November 4, 1963. By late 1963, tens of thousands of M16s were being made. And in early 1964, the first big shipments went to Vietnam. The Army still doubted the new rifle, but started replacing M14s with M16s in units going to Vietnam. The impossible had become real. A light rifle firing a small bullet was replacing the old heavy rifles that military planners had said were needed. Everything looked perfect. The M16 was lighter, easier to shoot, and easier to control in automatic fire. Soldiers could carry twice as much ammo. The rifle had worked perfectly in all official tests. Then the soldiers in Vietnam started dying because their rifles jammed. The first reports came in late 1965. M16s were not working right in combat. The rifles failed to push out spent bullets, leaving them stuck in the chamber. Soldiers were found dead with their rifles taken apart next to them, trying to clear jams under enemy fire. Marines wrote home saying their rifles were junk. Some soldiers trusted the M16 so little that they picked up enemy AK-47s from the battlefield, risking punishment to have a rifle that worked. Parents got letters from sons saying the rifles jammed every few shots. One Marine wrote, "We left with 72 men in our platoon and came back with 19. Believe it or not, do you know what killed most of us? Our own rifle." Almost every dead soldier was found with his M16 torn down next to him, trying to fix it. The jam rate was huge. In a 1967 survey, 80% of 585 troops said they had stoppages while shooting. The M16, the rifle meant to give American soldiers an edge over the enemy, had become a danger. Soldiers started calling it the Mattel toy, after the plastic toy company. They said it was fine for target shooting, but failed when lives were at risk. Some units asked to get the old M14 back. Others took AK-47s from dead Viet Cong. An underground market started, where soldiers traded cigarettes and other items for captured Soviet rifles. The weapon that was supposed to show American technology was now a symbol of betrayal. What went wrong? How could a rifle that worked perfectly in tests be deadly in battle? Eugene Stoner was shocked by the reports. He flew to Vietnam in early 1967 to look into it himself. What he found would start a congressional probe and reveal one of the worst failures in American military buying. The rifle he had made was basically sound, but the Army had changed it, and those changes were made without proper testing, without asking the designer, and without understanding how the rifle worked. Those changes turned a reliable weapon into a death trap. The first problem was the gunpowder Stoner had designed the AR-15 to use IMR 44475 powder, a kind of stick, powder that burned fairly clean. This powder had been used in all tests of the rifle. It made steady pressures, left little residue, and the rifle worked well with it. But the Army, without asking Colt or the designer, switched to a different propellant. They changed to WC-846 ball powder, made by Olin Matheson, which had close ties to Army buyers. Ball powder burned dirtier than IMR. It left more residue in the chamber and on the bolt. It also made slightly higher pressures, which raised the rifle cyclic rate from about 750 rounds per minute to nearly 1,000 rounds per minute. The faster cyclic rate made the rifle S extraction system pull cases out of the chamber faster than planned, combined with the dirtier powder leaving more residue. This made perfect conditions for extraction failures. Spent cases would stick in the chamber, and when the bolt tried to pull them out fast, the case rims would tear off, leaving the case stuck. The only way to clear the jam was to push a cleaning rod down the barrel and knock the case out a step that could not be done during a firefight. The second problem was chrome plating, or rather, the lack of it. The designer had said the chamber and bore should be chrome-plated to stop corrosion. Chrome plating was standard for military rifles meant for humid places. The jungles of Vietnam were hot, wet, and full of moisture, with no proper cleaning facilities. These were exactly the conditions where chrome plating was very important. Armalite had said from the start, to chrome plate, the rifles Colt had also asked for chrome plating in letters to Army buyers. But the Army, trying to save money, removed the chrome plating rule. They said it was not needed. The steel chambers rusted quickly in Vietnam's humidity. Rusty chambers made it harder to pull out spent cartridges, making jams even worse. Ammo stored in wet conditions also rusted. The brass cases got a layer of corrosion that made them stick. More than anything, experts later told Congress that not chrome plating. The chambers was the main reason M16s failed in Vietnam. The third problem was training on maintenance, or really the lack of it. The Army said the M16 was self-cleaning. They told soldiers it did not need regular care. Cleaning kits were not given to troops. Manuals were not given. Soldiers arrived in Vietnam having fired the rifle only once or twice, with no training on how to clean it, and no tools. Even if they knew how, the rifle was not self-cleaning. No gun ever is. The gas system sent hot gas straight into the receiver, which needed cleaning to prevent carbon buildup, combined with dirty ball, powder, no chrome plating, and wet jungle conditions. The lack of maintenance made rifles foul so fast they could not work. Soldiers used to M1 Garands and M14s that worked with little maintenance now carried rifles needing constant care. One very sad story. In the Congressional investigation showed a Marine unit in heavy combat. Only one Marine had a cleaning rod. As his fellow Marines' rifles jammed one by one, he ran up and down the line trying to clear each rifle. He was killed while trying to fix another Marine's jammed weapon. The investigation found that he died because the Army had not given cleaning equipment to the troops. The fourth problem was the forward assist. The original AR-15 design did not have a forward assist. This is a device that lets the shooter push the bolt forward if it does not close fully. The designer left it out on purpose. His philosophy was that if the bolt did not close on its own, there was a problem that needed fixing. Not forcing, but Army ordnance. Officers used to rifles with forward assists insisted on adding one to the M16. The forward assist let soldiers force rounds into dirty chambers, which put more stress on the extraction system and made jams more likely. Tests at Rock Island Arsenal had shown that forcing the bolt could cause serious extraction failures, but the Army ignored this. By early 1967, the M16 problem had become a national scandal. Parents wrote to Congress, newspapers ran stories about defective rifles. Soldiers were dying not from enemy fire, but because their weapons failed them. On May 15, 1967, Representative Richard Ilcord of Missouri started a special subcommittee on the M16 rifle hearings. The hearings went on until August 22, 1967. Hundreds of witnesses were called, and the report became one of the most critical documents in American military history. Eugene Stoner testified before the subcommittee. He explained that the Army had changed his design. Without asking him, he showed that with IMR powder, proper chrome plating, and regular maintenance, the M16 was as reliable as any military rifle ever made. He brought proof that he had recommended chrome plating from the start. He showed test results proving the rifle worked perfectly with the correct ammo. Colt representatives also testified. They said they had warned the Army about the problems with ball powder but were ignored. They showed papers proving Colt had asked for chrome plating, but the Army removed it to save money. They explained how Army procurement officers pressured them to accept changes that Colt's engineers knew would cause problems. Internal Colt memos to the committee showed that the company had predicted extraction failures months before they happened in Vietnam. Army ordnance officers also testified, and it was damaging. Under questioning, they admitted they had not properly tested the ball powder before approving it. They said they had not given cleaning kits or training materials to soldiers in Vietnam. They admitted that they had called the rifle self-cleaning, even though there was no proof. Some officers said they personally opposed the M16 and preferred the M14. The subcommittee's report came out on October 19, 1967, and was nearly 600 pages long. The conclusion was harsh. The report said M16 malfunctions were caused by Army mismanagement and neglect. The Ordnance Corps had changed the rifle's ammo without proper testing. They had removed important specifications like chrome plating to save money they had not provided. Training or maintenance tools to soldiers. They ignored warnings from the rifle's designers and manufacturer. The report used very strong language, saying that failing to take action was almost criminal negligence. The scandal forced fast action. The Army started producing chrome-plated chambers and bores. They switched back to improved powder for M16 ammo. They made millions of cleaning kits and gave them to every soldier in Vietnam. They made a comic book-style manual to show how to maintain. The rifle they started required training programs on M16 maintenance. They made 10 changes to the rifle design, creating the M16A1. The updated rifle was officially standardized on February 28, 1967, replacing the earlier XM16E1 name, the M16A1 with chrome-plated chamber. Correct ammo cleaning kits and trained soldiers worked as reliably as the designer had always said. By late 1968, the jam rate had dropped to levels like any other military rifle. Soldiers who got the updated M16A1 along with proper training and cleaning equipment, soldiers found it to be an excellent weapon. It was light, easy to aim, and easy to control. And when kept clean and fed the right ammo, it worked without fail. The rifle began to earn respect on the battlefield. Soldiers liked that they could carry 300 rounds instead of 140 of M14 ammo. They found it easy to use in the close fights common in Vietnam. They learned the small, fast bullet was deadly against enemy troops. The M16A1 stayed in service for the rest of the Vietnam War and became the standard rifle for all U.S. military branches. By the 1970s, many Allied nations adopted it, and by the 1980s, millions had been made. The rifle kept changing. The M16A2 in the 1980s had a heavier barrel, better rear sights, and a brass deflector for left-handed shooters. The M16A4 in the 1990s added a flat-top receiver and a Picatinny rail for scopes. In 1994, the military introduced the M4 carbine, a shorter version with a 14.12-inch barrel and a collapsible stock. The M4 later replaced the M16 in many front-line units, but both shared the same original ideas: the gas system, the straight-line stock, the aluminum receiver, and modular parts. The ideas that began in a Long Beach garage in the 1950s stayed. The base of U.S. military rifles 7 decades later, Eugene Stoner kept working after the AR-15. In 1961, after Armalite sold the rights to Colt, he became a consultant for Colt. He then went to Cadillac Gauge, where in 1962 and 1963 he designed the E-Toiletry. Stoner 63 weapons system, a modular design that could be a rifle, a carbine, or a light machine gun. The Stoner 63 was adopted by U.S. Navy SEALs and saw limited use in Vietnam. About 4,000 units were made from 1963 to 1971. The design showed Stoner this ongoing skill, though it never matched the wide use of the M16. In 1971, he co-founded Ares Incorporated in Port Clinton, Ohio. At Ares, he made improved versions of the Stoner 63, called the Stoner 86. He also worked on advanced ideas that were far ahead of their time. He experimented with polymer ammunition, trying to make it even lighter. He developed telescoping cartridges, so more rounds could fit in a magazine. He worked on caseless ammunition systems. These ideas were too radical in the early 1970s, but later influenced rifle designs in the 21st century. In 1990, at age 67, Eugene Stoner joined Knight's Armament Company in Titusville, Florida. There he designed the SR-25, a bigger version of the AR-15 chambered for 7.62mm NATO ammo. The SR-25 combined precision rifle accuracy with the reliability and handling of the M16. It was adopted by the U.S. Navy as the Mark 11 Mod 0 sniper weapon system. Navy SEALs used it in Iraq and Afghanistan, praising its accuracy and reliability. It was one of Stoner's final and finest creations. The SR-25 showed that the AR-15 design could work with larger cartridges, proving concepts first explored with the AR-10 decades earlier. In May 1990, Eugene Stoner met Mikhail Kalashnikov, the designer of the AK-47, for the first time. These two legendary firearms designers, whose rifles had armed opposing sides since the 1960s, met in Washington. They toured the NRA's National Firearms Museum together, looking at each other's rifles. They went shooting at a range in Virginia, firing each other's weapons. They visited the Marine Corps base at Quantico to watch new weapons testing. By all accounts, they became friends over those few days. Two designers who understood they were solving the same problems in different ways. Kalashnikov valued simplicity and toughness above all. Stoner valued lightweight and precision. Both succeeded in making weapons that would serve their nations for generations. Eugene Morrison Stoner died of cancer on April 24, 1997, at age 74. He was working on a firearms design in his Florida garage when he became too sick to continue. He was buried at Quantico National Cemetery in Virginia among the Marines he had served with more than 50. Years earlier, he was survived by his wife Barbara, whom he had married in 1965, 4 children from his first marriage, 7 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. He left no significant estate. Even though he designed the most widely produced military rifle in American history, he had never grown rich. The licensing agreements that gave him royalties were small, and he spent his life working for companies rather than owning them. He died as he had lived quietly, working on the problems that interested him, avoiding publicity, and letting his designs speak for themselves. The rifle he designed has become the most controversial firearm in American history. More than 30 million AR-15s, the civilian semi-automatic version of the M16, are now in American homes. They have become the symbol of gun rights for some Americans and the symbol of gun violence for others. 10 states have made various limits or bans on AR-15-style rifles. The debates continue passionate and unresolved. His family has said publicly that he designed the AR-15 as a military weapon, not for civilian use. They believe he would have been horrified by the weapon being linked to mass shootings. Others argue he would have supported civilian ownership, pointing to his work on civilian firearms during his career. The truth, like many things about the man, is probably more nuanced than either side admits. What is beyond debate is the rifle's military importance. The M16 family of rifles has served in every American military conflict since Vietnam. It has armed American soldiers in Grenada, Panama, the Persian Gulf War, Somalia, Bosnia, Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Iraq. It has been adopted by more than 80 nations and has been manufactured Under license by South Korea, Singapore, and the Philippines, it has inspired many copies and derivatives: the Taiwanese T-65, the Canadian C-7, the British L-85A1, and dozens of other rifles trace their lineage directly to the original designs. The rifle changed modern infantry tactics. Before its adoption, infantry doctrine assumed soldiers would fight at ranges of 400 to 600 yards. The M16's intermediate cartridge was optimized for combat under 300 yards, and this forced military planners to rethink how infantry units would fight. The result was new tactics that focused on fire and movement, suppressive fire, and fast attacks. Modern infantry combat, with its focus on speed and heavy firepower, was made possible by the M16's lightweight and high rate of fire. The rifle also changed military logistics in ways people often overlook. Because 5.56mm ammunition was lighter than 7.62 mm NATO rounds, soldiers could carry more ammo for the same weight. This meant infantry units could keep fighting longer without resupply, even far from supply bases. This was a big advantage. The M16's lightweight and ammo efficiency made modern air assault tactics possible. Soldiers could be dropped by helicopter carrying enough ammo for long fights, something impossible with heavier weapons and bigger ammo. The gas system designed in the rifle became the standard for modern military rifles. While some designers still like piston systems, most modern rifles use versions of the direct gas system. Its simplicity, lightweight, and reliability, when properly cleaned, have proven very hard to beat. Even rifles that look very different often use design. Ideas first shown in the AR-15, Eugene Stoner's story, challenges many ideas about gun design and military buying. He had no formal engineering education past high school. He learned his trade in aircraft factories and machine shops. He designed weapons in his garage, not in military labs. He questioned old ideas everyone else accepted as true. He succeeded because he was willing to think differently, to use materials others ignored, and to challenge experts who said his ideas were impossible. Army ordnance officers who opposed his rifle had decades of experience. They had engineering degrees from top universities. They had designed weapons used in 2 world wars. They believed a self-taught machinist from California could not know more about rifle design than they did. They were wrong. Their arrogance and refusal to admit they might be wrong cost American soldiers their lives in Vietnam. The M16 disaster of 1967 was not because the rifle was bad. It was caused by military officials who changed the design without understanding it, who ignored warnings from the designer and company, and who put pride above soldier safety. The Congressional investigation found that Army officials with authority had failed to fix known problems, and that this failure bordered on criminal negligence. Yet despite this harsh conclusion, no one was held responsible. No one was court-martialed. No one lost command. The institutional culture that caused the disaster stayed mostly the same. Later, investigations and reforms improved military procurement procedures, but similar problems still appear. The lesson that should have been learned, that innovation can come from unexpected sources, and that expertise should be respected, no matter its origin, is still hard for big institutions to accept. The M16's rocky introduction to service remains a warning about bureaucratic arrogance and the need to listen to designers and engineers who actually understand the systems they make. Eugene Stoner never became as famous as Thomas Edison or Henry Ford. Most Americans who own AR-15s do not know his name. Most soldiers who carried M16s in Vietnam never learned who designed the rifle that saved or took their lives. He stayed throughout. His life, a quiet, modest engineer, more comfortable in machine shops than in corporate offices. He avoided publicity, rarely gave interviews. He let his designs speak for themselves. When reporters did manage to interview him, they found a soft-spoken man more interested in technical details than taking credit for his achievements. But his legacy is impossible to ignore. Walk into any American gun store, and you will see dozens of AR-15 variants. Visit any military base, and you will see soldiers training with M4s, direct descendants of his design. Look at infantry tactics, manuals from any modern military, and you will see doctrines assuming soldiers carry weapons with the features built into the AR-15. His rifle became the standard by which all other infantry rifles are measured. When nations develop new military rifles, they compare them to the M16. When soldiers debate the merits of different weapons, the M16 is the baseline. The statistics tell the story of unprecedented success. Approximately 8 million M16 rifles have been made for military use worldwide, and the M4 carbine, a smaller version of the M16, has been made in additional millions. More than 30 million AR-15 rifles have been sold to American civilians, making it the most popular rifle platform in the United States. The rifle has been made in more than a dozen nations. It has been used in more than 100 conflicts. It has armed soldiers from more than 80 nations. It has been the main weapon of the United States military for over 60 years, longer than any other rifle in American history, and it shows no signs of being replaced. The United States Army has run many programs to try to replace the M16 and M4 with new rifles, but all have said no current design gives enough benefit to pay the huge cost of changing to a new system. The latest effort, the Next Generation Squad Weapon Program, has made a new rifle, but fully replacing the M4 will take decades if it happens at all. The M4 will likely stay America's main infantry rifle for years to come. Eugene Stoner proved that one person working with determination and intelligence can change the world. He proved that formal schooling is not always needed for big new ideas. He proved that asking why and questioning accepted wisdom can lead to breakthroughs that experts miss. He proved that light materials and unusual designs can win where old ways fail. And he proved, even though he did not live to see it all, that good engineering can eventually beat slow bureaucracy and institutional resistance. The rifle people said could not be made became the rifle that defined modern infantry warfare. The machinist they had dismissed as unqualified designed the weapon that experts still struggle to improve. The young man who could not pay for college created technology that changed military history. Eugene Morrison Stoner, born in a small Indiana town during the Great Depression, died having done what he set out to do. He designed and helped build the most effective infantry rifle the world had seen. That the trip from a garage workshop to military standard needed decades, congressional investigations, and many obstacles only makes the success more remarkable. The rifle, everyone said, was impossible to make became, against all odds and all expectations, America's rifle.